Hello, I am Dr. Mirela Cernăianu, and I welcome you to the Wellness Optimizing Warrior MD podcast, the WOW MD podcast. I am not your typical wellness coach, and this is not a typical wellness podcast. Here, I'll discuss educational facts about health, hormones, intimacy, anti-aging, and beauty trends, all very hot topics, to empower you to make great choices when it comes to your health and to your body. I want you to go, wow, I did not know that. Or, wow, this is going to make a great difference for me. Our healthcare system is broken and it needs a revolution. You and I can start one today. I am willing to share my knowledge with the world if you're willing to listen. Let's get started. Hello, listener, and welcome. This is podcast episode 2, and it is part of a series of episodes about hormones. If you have listened to episode 1, my introduction to body's hormones, you might have found it a little bit pedantic or a little bit dry. One of my lovely patients told me she fell asleep listening to it. You were probably true. It might have been a little on the slow side. It's hard when I try to make the presentation about the body's hormones to not focus on facts. So it tends to get a little bit dry. However, I promise today's podcast is easier to listen to and more relatable because I love this topic. This is all about estrogen and how estrogen is awesome for us women. I promise you will be wowed in this podcast with some facts and personal opinions that I hope will leave your mind busy asking questions. And hopefully you'll become thirsty to know more. So this podcast, it's all about estrogen. So if you think, well, I'm a man, I don't know anything about estrogen, and I don't need to know about estrogen, please continue to listen because there are many reasons why you should know about estrogen. Well, number one, you probably have a few women in your life that you care about. So you do want to know about estrogen because that's important and it affects the women in your life. And number two, estrogen is important for men too. And I will be talking about that shortly. Maybe not necessarily in this episode, as this is all about estrogen for women, but there are references in estrogen for men coming up in the future podcasts. So you might ask, what is there to be wowed about regarding estrogen? It's a woman's hormone, and that's all there is to it. Well, if that's how you feel, let me tell you something. You don't know estrogen like I know estrogen. And I would like to introduce you to estrogen the way every woman should know estrogen. Allow me to introduce you to your body's best friend if you're a woman. Yes, estrogen is your best friend as a hormone from age 12 to 52 for about 40 years. And it can continue to remain your best friend past menopause as well. But at that point, it's a replacement, a clone, if you will. So why is estrogen a woman's best friend? Because it is the hormone that makes you a woman, and because a minimal amount of estrogen with a good optimal amount of testosterone is what makes a man a man. This hormone for women, though, is the absolute essence of our femininity. I don't know if it's a word, but I like the way it sounds, so I used it. Femininity. Estrogen is all about our femininity. I hope you already know that estrogen is the hormone that allows a woman to be a woman. This is not new information to you, and it shouldn't be. Estrogen gives a woman her sexuality, her fertility, and her ability to bear and nourish children. Being a woman means many things. Somebody already made a documentary about this. It's called What is a Woman? Very interesting. If you haven't seen it, look it up. But this is not what this podcast is about. What I want to focus on in this podcast is the value and importance of estrogen for a woman. There are a lot of things to discuss here and present as facts. I decided to do this specific topic for my second podcast because the majority of my patients are women. I realized that they don't know about estrogen. No one has told them. So allow me to introduce and present estrogen to you as I know it and as medical science knows it. Estrogen should not be a secret. This information about how valuable estrogen is for a woman's body should be out there available for everyone. But for some reason, it's not really at the forefront of medical information. This kind of knowledge is completely lacking in the majority of my patients and even the women on my team that work with me. When you mention estrogen, people hear risk of cancer, weight gain, painful and heavy periods, crazy moods. So I'd like to start by addressing some of these misconceptions and the misinformation and the bad rap estrogen has. Estrogen is not bad. Let's establish that right off the bat. And let's do so by using logical reasoning. Let me ask you a question. If estrogen is not good for us women after menopause, then why is it good for us before menopause? So that's an interesting question. I'm going to repeat it to you. If estrogen is not good for us after menopause, then why is it good for us before menopause? What do you think or what do you believe changes in your body suddenly at or around the age of 40 to 50 that turns this magic feminine hormone into suddenly an undesirable hormone? Are we just baby-making machines, and once our baby-making capacity is over, then estrogen is bad for us? Is it truth that estrogen after menopause is bad and to be avoided? Or is it a myth reinforced by uneducated people that have a platform and perhaps an unknown purpose to disseminate this kind of information? Is it science or misinformation that estrogen increases your risk of cancer after menopause? Why does the majority of women who develop breast cancer do so after the age of 50? By the way, in case this is a new fact for you and you haven't heard this before, this is a true fact. 90% of all breast cancer patients are diagnosed with breast cancer over the age of 50. So less than 10% of all cancers are detected under 50, and the majority of those are between 40 and 50. So we rarely deal with breast cancer at a very young age. So what happens to our estrogen when we're young, 20s, 30s? Well, it's super high, but we don't get breast cancer. What happens to our estrogen after the age of 50? Well, it declines or is gone. So our estrogen goes away and our risk of cancer goes up. But instead, you hear how estrogen after 50 increases your risk of cancer. So it's true. Your risk of cancer goes up after 50. It's very true. But it has nothing to do with estrogen or using estrogen as a hormone replacement. And it's a whole another topic to explain why this is so. But for the purpose of how awesome estrogen is, I'll come back to estrogen. Maybe our risk for cancer after 50 goes up because we lose our estrogen, because we have less estrogen. Again, this is to be continued at a later time. But I wanted to introduce this idea. Personally, I don't believe for 1 second that God, nature, or evolution, whatever you believe in, gave us this wonderful, sexy hormone to procreate only. And I don't believe that this amazing, awesome hormone that does so much for our female bodies suddenly is bad once we cross the 40-50 landmark in our lifeline. In my mind, this is just common sense that this is a very valuable hormone that is likely the best anti-aging tool we have in our toolbox to improve functionality as we age. And I will prove it to you in this podcast. On the flip side of this, estrogen can be bad if it is excessive and too high, not balanced right. And I will dedicate more time soon talking about the dangers of high estrogen for both women and men. But if you take one thing from this podcast, please take this fact. Estrogen is awesome and is only bad for you if it's not balanced correctly. You might remember, if not, just listen to the first 5 to 10 minutes. In the last episode, where I introduced you to the body's hormones, I discussed the fact that every single hormone in the body does not operate alone, but is part of a complicated, interconnected endocrine hormonal system. And in no other hormonal system is this more true as it is for estrogen. Estrogen works as part of a team. It has two amazing partners, progesterone and testosterone. Progesterone is estrogen's amazing sidekick, and testosterone is an awesome hormone by itself. So envision the body's sex hormones, the sex hormone team, and then all hormones as the big main team. Whether you look at the little team or the big team or the little team as part of the big team, these teams of hormones, these groups of hormones, are operating together as well-trained, highly skilled teams. And they have a very specific goal: to keep the body healthy and in balance. These team members always work really well with each other, unless one of them is malfunctioning. There's trouble afoot if one hormone is deficient or excessive. In that case, the team is no longer efficient in maintaining the body's health and balance, and that's a problem. If you didn't get my analogy with the team explanation, imagine each hormone as an instrument in an orchestra that generates a beautiful melody. That's our hormonal endocrine system. The hormones are the orchestra, and they all work together to generate a healthy, beautiful body. When one hormone is off balance, it will throw off the entire balance of the body. Just like a bad, out-of-tune instrument will generate a melody that might not even sound like music, maybe just noise that you probably don't even want to listen to. So why did I use these two analogies? Because I want you to understand that a hormone has to be just right in order for you to feel well. And if the hormone is just right, it will be an awesome hormone. And that's the truth about estrogen. Estrogen needs to work together with two other sex hormones, progesterone and testosterone. If these three hormones are not completely in balance, if the optimal relationship and ratio between production, metabolism, detoxification, and elimination is not right, then a woman will not feel great. She might actually feel poorly. So let's come back to estrogen. Again, I've said it 100 times probably. Estrogen is awesome. And please listen. I will prove to you why estrogen is awesome. Estrogen is far from being bad in any way, shape, or form. But again, out of balance estrogen is bad for you. And I will talk about that too in a future podcast. For now, I would like to keep it simple and provide you with my top 10 reasons on why estrogen is awesome for your body as a woman. Let's start with number 1, estrogen and our sexuality. If you're a woman listening to this podcast, you should know that this is the hormone that makes you a woman. Due to this hormone, you have sexual organs like vagina, cervix, uterus, tubes, and ovaries, and secondary sexual characteristics like breasts, wider hips, a certain fat deposition in the body, and a very specific distribution of hair follicles that is very different than a man's. Women have estrogen, men have testosterone, just as a side note. Women also have testosterone. Again, it's very important, separate podcast for it. But just remember what estrogen does for women, testosterone does for men. And that will be a separate podcast. Coming back to estrogen, as a woman, you are able to ovulate, be fertile, carry children in your womb, grow them for 9 months, give birth to them, and then nourish them by breastfeeding. And that's only because you have estrogen optimally balanced by progesterone. And then estrogen bows down and sets the stage for prolactin, the lactation hormone. And then it comes back to allow you to become fertile again and bear more children, nourish more children, etc. You cannot do any of these things without estrogen. As a woman, your desire to have sex and be intimate with the partner you desire is crucially linked to the presence of estrogen in your body. Estrogen is involved in sexual desire in many ways. not just because it nourishes and maintains healthy sexual organs, but also because it influences your brain, your psychology, your desire to be intimate with someone, your fantasies, and your dreams. Let's talk about sex just for a second. The truth is, as a woman, you cannot have sex if you have zero estrogen after a certain age for a long time. You can get away with minimal estrogen when you're young because it takes many years in order for our sexual organs to suffer from the loss of estrogen. If you're a young woman using birth control pills, you likely have very low estrogen, just like menopause, but different because your FSH levels are low and suppressed by the birth control pills, so there are no hot flashes. But there are many signs and symptoms of menopause because of you being on the birth control pills. Low sexual desire, vaginal dryness, smaller breasts. But you have youth on your side. So even though you might have some interesting symptoms that just give you a small preview of what menopause will feel like, you do have young age as an advantage. Being younger means we keep things that are good for longer. However, once you turn 40, you lose that advantage. Our decline in estrogen happens. This decline is more and more significant as we approach 50. The loss is sudden and complete after 50. So does the loss of estrogen at menopause mean that you will lose your sexuality? For many women after menopause, this is unfortunately absolutely true. They will stop having sex due to vaginal atrophy caused by loss of estrogen. Vaginal atrophy is the thinning of the vaginal tissues and the skin of the vaginal opening. The tissues become extremely dry, inelastic, and thinner, so sex is just too painful to endure. Even if sex is possible and not painful, the clitoris has now shrunk. It's much smaller than it used to be. So the orgasm can become more elusive and much harder to achieve. What many women do not know is that the chance of a UTI is much higher with sex after menopause or with sex at a young age when estrogen is low, because the bladder and the urethral lining are also nourished and supported by estrogen. The loss of estrogen creates changes that increase urinary leakage, increase the urgency to go use the bathroom. And sometimes this urgency is so intense and comes with so little warning that it promotes accidents. And more so, women that have low estrogen can wake up at night to use the bathroom at least 2 to 3 times, sometimes 5 or 6 times. That disrupts the sleep. So there's much more to know and talk about on this subject. There could be not one, but a couple of podcasts about this, how estrogen influences our sexuality, our vaginal health, and our urinary health. But let's move on to reason number 2, why estrogen is awesome. Number 2 reason is because estrogen is extremely important for a woman's brain. As a woman, your mood and mental health are strongly influenced by your sex hormone levels. Many areas in the brain have abundant estrogen receptors, and the association between anxiety, depression, and estrogen is well known and has been studied. Estrogen is crucial and vital for a woman's mood. There are so many mood changes that occur only in women and are related to estrogen only. PMS, PMDD, that's premenstrual syndrome and premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And then you have postpartum depression and postmenopausal depression. The truth is, without estrogen, women become depressed, emotional, and irritable. Estrogen replacement may increase levels of serotonin and dopamine, leading to significant mood improvement. And that's a pretty well-known fact. However, very few psychiatrists or family practice docs, even OBGYNs, give estrogen replacement a chance. And instead, when a woman complains of being anxious or depressed, they always start them on an antidepressant. Perhaps more than a third of women in the United States are currently on antidepressant therapy or anxiety medications or both. What are the most common side effects of these medications? Fatigue, insomnia, and weight gain. Unfortunately, these are already symptoms a woman has been experiencing when going through menopause. So it just makes some matters a lot worse. If the doctors that evaluate such women and determine it is appropriate to start them on an antidepressant would in fact decide to receive valuable training in hormone physiology, training in understanding how hormones influence mood, and they would try to understand the causality relationship between mood and sex hormone deficiencies and imbalances, then these doctors would actually address the root cause of the mood disorder, and their patients would receive hormone balancing treatment instead of a drug. The outcomes might be much better. Considering hormones as the cause of a mood disorder should be very high on the priority list of whatever workup the doctor is going to look into, and a hormone evaluation should at least be recommended before starting someone on an antidepressant medication. Let me repeat that. Considering hormones as the cause of a mood disorder should be very high on the priority list. Ask your physician for a hormone evaluation, as that should be at least considered and discussed before starting someone on an antidepressant medication. Other than mood, what are other ways estrogen affects the brain? Well, estrogen has a profound impact on the structural and functional plasticity of the brain and the brain's ability to heal after an injury. It enhances and supports the process of creating new brain cells, particularly in the hippocampus, the region crucial for memory and learning. And estrogen also promotes the formation of new connections between brain cells, also called synapses. Estrogen facilitates efficient communication within the brain. All these brain cellular changes I just mentioned that are mediated by estrogen is how estrogen contributes to improved memory, concentration, and cognitive performance. Do you ever wonder why women after the age of 40 or 50 become easily distracted, forgetful, and seem absent-minded? Suddenly, making a list is a must, and recalling names or words is difficult. Some women wonder if they're getting Alzheimer's. Estrogen replacement can reduce or eliminate the sensation of foggy brain. My own sister called me and asked for my help, thinking she's developing dementia in her early 50s. She was suffering from low estrogen and some very low vitamins. As soon as she started estrogen therapy, she immediately felt brain function improve. I hear the same result from at least 30 to 40% of the menopausal women I treat. Their memory is better and their foggy brain clears up with estrogen. Remember, your brain is bathed in estrogen from the age of 12 until menopause. When estrogen goes away, you will feel it. Your brain will feel it. And last but not least, estrogen is also awesome for the brain because it promotes and supports a healthy sleep. Not only will estrogen alleviate hot flashes that might wake you up from sleep, it will also help you fall asleep easier and faster if you wake up throughout the night. Estrogen improves quantity and quality of sleep. And just know that disturbed sleep after menopause is a big problem for many women. Let me stop here for today's podcast. Please come back next week. I have more amazing facts about this crucial feminine hormone to share with you. Next week, I will continue discussing my top 10 reasons why I believe estrogen is an absolutely awesome hormone. And I will discuss how estrogen supports 3, our heart, 4, our musculoskeletal system, 5, our weight, 6, our vision, and 7, I will discuss estrogen and how it influences our skin and the skin-beauty connection. 8, energy and vitality. 9, our immune system. And 10, last but not least, quality of life. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next week. If you liked the information you heard and you'd like to hear more, please subscribe and follow my podcast. Should you find the content helpful to not just you, but possibly others, please share it and feel free to leave us a review. You are welcome to join the Facebook group the Warrior Optimizing Wellness MD. I certainly hope that you've heard many things in this podcast that made you go, wow, I did not know that, or wow, I'd like to know more. So keep listening and I'll keep talking.